My kayak is getting in the way in my workshop. It's starting to gather dust and it needs somewhere to live. So I've decided to put it across this wall here and it'll be on display in a cabinet. Before I do start on the cabinet though, I need to build this wall out above. It won't take long. I'll take all the stuff off the wall and put the kayak next door and get into it. I'll quickly frame out the wall, then cover it with plywood, which I've been meaning to do for a while anyway. Now that's done, I can get started on the cabinet. I've worked out all the measurements and I'll be making it out of 12mm or 1/2 inch lightweight plywood. It's not bad quality and it stays fairly flat, although it is pretty soft and it dings easily, but that shouldn't matter for this purpose. I've ripped down all the pieces and now I'll cut them all to length. The back panels need to be shorter than the top and bottom pieces by the thickness of one piece of plywood, and that will be the side panel, so I'm adjusting the stop block by using a scrap of plywood. And the side panels are the same height as the back panel, so I can use the offcut from that to set a stop. That's all the pieces cut, so I can start fixing them together, and to do that I'm keeping it simple using glue and nails. I wasn't sure how to go about this project, but I've decided to build it in 2 halves and then join them together on the wall. That's 1/2 done, and off camera I made the other half, and I can't believe the size of this thing now that it's in front of me, but that's the size it needs to be. Anyway, let's fix it to the wall. I was going to get somebody to help, but as the plywood is lightweight, I thought I'd try it on my own first, and if that fails, I'll get some help then. That wasn't too bad at all. Now I'll fix it to the wall by screwing it into the corrugated tin which goes across the bottom half of the cabinet. I put quite a few screws in, and then the top half of the cabinet will be fixed straight into the studs of the new wall that I just put up. It needs some packers behind as the plywood is set back a little from the tin. Next I'll join each side of the top and bottom panels together. That all went a lot smoother than I expected it to do. Next I'll make some trim for a face frame. I'll use this old fascia board. It's solid hardwood. I'm not 100% sure what it is, but I think it may be spotted gum. It almost goes the full length of the cabinet, but it does fall just a bit short. It's always a bit scary putting reclaimed timber through the thicknesser, but I did check it pretty thoroughly for nails first and it worked out just fine. There's some pretty dark stains around the nail hole, so I'll try and reduce those a bit with some stain remover. I've wet it down first and now I'm scrubbing the solution into the wood. After about 10 to 15 minutes I washed it off and left it to dry overnight. It's still not perfect, but it definitely looks better. As I said earlier, the lengths aren't quite long enough, so I'll join pieces on the end and I'll do that with biscuits. I couldn't get any small biscuits from my local hardware store, so I decided to sand down the ones that I already have. Marking it the way I did happened to be just right. It's pretty shallow and it won't add any strength, but it will keep it aligned, and that's what I need. Before I fix them to the cabinet, I need to add some grooves, and that's for the glass doors to slide in. I make one cut in all the pieces, then slightly widen the groove by lightly nudging the fence over and making a second cut. I'll glue and nail the trim on, and I'm hoping that the spotted gum will help keep the long plywood edge straight. The biggest challenge of this project is how to keep the cabinet open and stay straight, not only to look right, but also because the doors need to slide correctly. I found a thin piece of wood from my scrap drawer to glue behind the trim and add a bit more strength to the joint. The trim will definitely help keep it straight as the plywood is extremely light, but the weight of the doors on the bottom trim means it will need a bit of extra support. I was always planning to weld steel brackets, but I thought I'd try making them from plywood first. I sanded them smooth, but before I fitted them, I added a stud to the back of the wall just in the right place. I reckon that made a big difference, so next I can finish the trim. I'll put the acrylic glass into the bottom grooves, but first I'll put a couple of thin strips of mat board that I just cut. They'll make some clearance between the top and bottom trim after they've been removed. I should have glued the plywood edge before positioning the trim, but I managed anyway. I forgot to cut the short piece down to length, so I did that in place. Next I planed down the side pieces of trim so they sit behind the glass. I also strengthened the back of these joints with thin strips of plywood. There's a few exposed plywood edges on the sides of the cabinet, and I decided to cut veneers from strips of plywood to cover those up. Now it's time to test fit the kayak itself. It'll sit on a couple of plywood hooks, but first I need to take the shape of the hooks directly from the kayak. I also need some reference to keep the kayak upright when it's on display, and I can get that from the angle of the underside of the hull. I've transferred the angle to a bevel gauge, and now I'll be able to match the template to it. There's two hooks and they're both shaped individually to match the boat. It's time to do a test fit, and this is how I plan to put the kayak in and remove it when I want to use it. I stand on this workbench all the time for different things, so I'm used to climbing up on it, and it's the perfect height to access the cabinet. I'm really liking how that looks, and I thought now would be a good moment to share some footage of me and Corinne out for a paddle with the finished kayaks together for the first time on the water, and also a big thanks to our mate Trevor Cooper for taking the awesome drone footage. I took the kayak with me when I recently went down to Sydney for a few weeks, and I reckon this will be the first of many paddles together, and you can see that I need to get some experience, especially next to Corinne, who knows how to paddle a kayak. Anyway, back to the cabinet, and I need to make a couple of adjustments to the hooks. I'll angle the table over on the belt grinder and sand the inside of the hooks to better match the kayak. I also packed out the hook nearest to the stern to bring that end of the kayak forward a bit. Even though I'm fixing the hooks to the cabinet, I'm also fixing them straight through to the wall, so really the kayak is actually hanging directly off the wall. I'll paint the inside first with an undercoat, and the outside and trim will later get coated with oil. The paint is a matte finish, and here's the colour if anyone's interested. I'll be adding lights to the inside, and that's the reason for using matte paint to cut down on reflections. I did some filling and sanding, and I gave both the inside and out a few coats to finish it. For the lights, I'm using LED strips, and I'll put a strip along the back of the top and bottom trim. I did order some aluminium tracks with diffusers for the lights that go in, but they haven't arrived. So for now, I've just stuck them to the back of the trim, and I'll install the tracks when I get them. We're nearly there. I just need to stick some adhesive back felt onto the hooks for the kayak to sit on and then fit the glass. The kayak may look a little precarious just sitting there on its side, but I can assure you that it's perfectly safe. The weight and the balance of it in this position just wants to go back against the wall. I'm not sure what you think of it, and I'm sure some people will think that it's way over the top, but I needed to put it somewhere, and I think it looks fantastic. I reckon it looks great, and I love having the kayak on display. If you didn't see how I made the kayak, or you just want to watch all the kayak build videos again, including how I made the seat and the paddle, I've made a playlist and that's on the screen now. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, please like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.